Theological College in North India, and he is the academic dean of New Life Bible Seminary, Kerala, India. And he's going to talk about his title of the paper is Unsystematizing Contextual Theologies, Pointers to Listen to the Voices of Asia Responsibly. Let us just put our hands together and welcome Brother Raj so that I can present it.
Thank you, Dr. And thank all of you for your presence over here. So my paper came. So hopefully you have the copies with you. And I'll be reading first, then we will have an introduction. Unsystematizing Contextual Theologies. Pointers to listen the voices of Asia responsibly. Theological training and reflection in Asia demand servants of God to be more responsible, relevant, and vigorous in listening, discerning, and responding to the many substantial voices of Asia. We must be suspicious about the adequacy of current contextual theologies in this regard. Perhaps Asian contextual theologies, which emerged as a reaction to the systematization of the West, have fallen into the tunnel trap of systematization. This systematization resulted ultimately to listen only one voice of a context and we become more particularized. It is sidelined other voices which reverberated in the same context. To make it clear, Asian contextual theologies systematized genuine theological expressions by a dominant voice of a context, and other voices in the same context are not attended responsibly. This paper opens up discussion on an alternative to this systematization process, that is unsystematization. Multiple voices from a context and interdisciplinarity in doing theology provoke me to think of unsystematized current contextual theologies. This would help us to record, discern, and respond meaningfully to the voices of our context. Voices in Asia and limitations of Asian contextual theologies. Theologian needs to respond to the voice of God at the same time to the voices of other beings. It includes the voices of the term voice is used neutrally in this paper to designate a kind of expression to communicate or signal something. Theologically, it is an inclusive term which includes the voice of God, human, animals, and nature. To listen, discern, and respond to these voices is the task of a theology. Let me initially draw some potential voices from Asian context in order to address the constraints of current contextual theologizing and recommend a revisioned theology in Asian context. Polyphonies of Asia, the locus of Asian theologies. Asian reality is polyphonic in nature, which characterized with paradoxical and unscientific or irrational in many respects. This nature of Asian reality cannot be comprehended perhaps with the systematized or rationalized categories. It is emphatically recorded in the previous 8-year theological consultation as well. As David Kwan Sang-Fu, pardon me for wrong pronunciation, a first generation Minching theologian shares his first experience of teaching Asian theology. I discovered painfully that I am really ignorant about Asia. He continues to say, Asia is so big, diverse, and so different, not only in relation to other continents, but also within itself, among the peoples and societies within it. Satyanarayana Clark quotes an African situation which is akin to Asia which also worthwhile to mention here. There is not one world but many, not one history but many, not one theology but many, not one space or milieu but many that are different and perhaps even antagonistic. We have a situation of multiple voices within Asia. That means one cannot categorize or systematize the reality of the people groups in a comprehensible way. Otherwise, we find plurality of context in every aspect of Asian life, socio, political, economic, religious, and so on. But I am afraid to compartmentalize or systematize such varieties of context into socio-economic and religious. After surveying last 50 years of theological scene of Asia, K.C. Abraham observed that Asian reality cannot be rigidly compartmentalized into socio-political and religious, cultural, and so on. The reality of Asia is beyond any compartmentalization, or else, if any compartmentalization is made, always it must be ready to accept its limitations and to ready to deconstruct such compartmentalization on a regular basis. In short, unsystematized plurality of context, that is our context, Asian context, is the site of our theologizing activity. To this messiness or this unsystematic context, what would be our context? Or if you believe in contextual theology, what will be our contextual theology? Unable to record polyphonies, limitation of systematic contextual theology. Context theologies emerged in Asia mainly as a response to Western systematic theology and inadequacy of indigenous theology as elsewhere shared. It tried to comprehend contextual voices for theology, but perhaps could only record the dominant voice of the context and pretend to be deaf towards other voices. This process, very important, which I italicized, process of limiting the theologizing into the predominant voice of a context without recognizing the other feeble voices, I call it as the systematization of contextual theology. I find some examples from my Indian context to explicit this fact and share perils of systematization of contextual theologies. It is considered that Robert Doty Nobly was one of the pioneers in Indian Christian theology, who was much diligent in translating his Catholic faith to the Indian context by misunderstanding or understanding dominant Brahminical voice as the culture of the entire people of India. Continuing his tradition, traditional Indian Christian theology thrived in a way under Brahminical system of India, where Dalit and tribal voices are unheard. Even the first textbook on Indian Christian theology written by Robin Boyd is predominantly you see Vedic terms or Brahminical terms where the voices of Dalits are not heard. It took nearly 5 decades to reorient our theology towards Dalit and tribal people groups of India. It is through Arun P. Nirmal who introduced the Dalit theology, which made a great havoc in Indian theological scenario. More specifically, though the Indian church constituted with a majority by Dalits, their voices in the theological deliberations was unheard until recent time. Further, the theologizing system delayed in noticing feeble and discontent voice within Dalit communities, such as Dalit woman, who is known as Dalits of Dalits. Further, Dalit theology did not take a risk to encounter and interact with the other feeble or the dominant voices of India. That means Dalit theology is in comfortable zone within a system and has done little attempt to listen other feeble voices of Indian context, which is in unrest from Dalit point of view. Of course, the rationale for the emergence of contextual theologies is to be openness towards other voices. Nevertheless, theological articulations in Asia tried to systematize in every plan and action and could not heed many voices within a system. It's a serious disadvantage of most of the contextual theological articulations in Asia. Now, what are the consequences of this neglection to the sidelined or silenced voices in our theological circle? First, Christian faith becomes yet another tool in the hands of dominant voice in a system to oppress, exclude, and divide other sidelined and feeble voices and the communities. Second, it affects our theological training as well. Students who are not trained to heed multiple voices within a context from seminaries, there is a chance to trample upon the feeble voices. Finally, Asian contextual theology will not be a holistic and responsible theological reflection since it could not comprehend or heed many voices of a system, if you think there's a system responsibly. Revisioning, doing theology in an unsystematized Asian context. It makes us to realize that all voices of a particular system or context are important and unique. Theologians cannot bypass them but heed and respond to these voices. Further, theologians cannot settle after innovating and responding to a voice from the particular system, but must always in search of other silenced and or unnoticed voices, owing to the slippery nature of context. By the time we begin to understand various aspects of a context, it changes itself into a new context. There is always tentativeness about context, right? Joseph Prabhakar there. This tentative nature is also with the theological reflection. So how do we define theology is very important. How do we define theology? We define theology is from God or human attempt. And I think it is a human attempt. Theologizing is a human endeavor to understand the relationship between God, humans, and cosmos. That's a theology. So, one of the characteristics of theology is liquidity, which never intends to construct systems to explain timeless truths to a situation. It's a human attempt. Very important. As elsewhere mentioned, the context in Asia always change in an unsystematic way, which cannot be comprehended with some systematic thing. To this context, what should be our contextual theology? Perhaps it should not be a systematic one. According to John Parrott, by definition, systematic theology is static and stagnant. It's not a dynamic movement. As Hua Young alerts us that Asian theology is tapped into a predetermined and interpretive framework around which everything else is made to fit into a logical theological system. Then let us invite contextual theology, the giant despotised system, to solve or deal with this unsystematic contextual issue. Can a system fit into the unsystematic context of Asia? It is a jeopardized attempt to use a tool which is not suitable to unsystematic context. However, taking up the positive elements of context theology to the context of unsystematics, we need a contextual theology of unsystematization. Theology is characterized with this liquidity. Therefore, to the context of unsystematic, the theology without any adjective of systematic or contextual can render an unsystematic nature. Theology must ebb through gutters, grow and trench, leaking here and there, moving back and forth in an unsystematic way in the unsystematic Asian context. To sum up our discussion on the reorientation of our theological vocation, we have two major concerns to address. First, our context is always tentative, and second, theologizing is always reforming the changing context. In this situation, let us unsystematize our current current contextual theologies to listen multiple voices within a context responsibly. Vision of unsystematizing contextual theology, a proposal to record world bodies. As I was reflecting upon the vision to unsystematize contextual theologies as a fresh attempt, for the surprise, our forefathers of HTA envisioned it long ago. Let us listen to the words echoed in the 6th HTA Theological Consultation, where Wilson W. Chaw shared in relation to Western theological tradition in Asia is that we have to decontextualize much of our present available theologies before we can actually contextualize. In the same theological consultation, Tanner said, the situational character of theology means further that no theological formulation should be transported into another period of culture without creative reinterpretation and recontextualizing. John Parrott also joins with this when he says the great systems of the past will require constant rewriting and updating. We should have courage to decontextualize, recontextualize, and rewrite our theologies on a regular basis, as our forefathers had envisioned. I think it is the daring undertaking and need of the hour. I name this task as unsystematizing contextual theologies from its systematization tendency and legacy. And I may say it is a post-contextual theology that after finishing my paper I was thinking of writing a book on that, a post-contextual theology. Doing unsystematic theology. Though the term itself has a negative connotation, but I intentionally selected this term, though it is a negative, how we can explain the reality which is have a chaotic situation or ambiguity, how we can explain our mysteries more logically. It's not only to our context, it also applies to our theology. How do we explain logically the hypostatic union very systematically? How? There is a limitation in our systematization. We must agree. I think you are free to disagree with me. Thank you. As elsewhere mentioned, the daring vocation of a theologian is not developing a systematic of theological tools, but his or her decisions and reflections towards the pressing issues and challenges of Asia. In the words of C.S. Song, the theology is not a systematization of the contents of faith, but the acting out of that faith in real life situations. What is the opposite to systematic may not be contextual one, rather unsystematic. That's the opposite term. A round table is needed for this systematization, where all voices are heard equally valid and important. When different voices are heard in a public forum, we spontaneously reshuffle our perception by deleting some presuppositions or misconceptions about others, which would automatically lead us to unsystematize our current theological thoughts that we hold. I feel such meaningful interaction with the realities of the common people, especially with those who are at the margins, is the need of the hour. To do this pragmatic interaction and intervention to the people's situation, we must mold our theological disciplines accordingly, where we need interdisciplinary approach to this. The interdisciplinary option helps the theologian to be sensitive towards the word or discordant voices within a system, since different aspects of a context such as cultural or all together we have in Asia. A collaboration of scholars from different disciplines helps us to do theology together in Asia. Let us further ponder upon this approach in unsystematic theological activity. So let me know how it is. 10 minutes. Recognizing the approach in unsystematizing concepts of theology. In the words of Canale, for about 17 centuries, Christian theology was done within the confines of systematic or dogmatic theology. In that context, an interdisciplinary methodology was not a necessary thing. But now we have unlike the past, we have new situation of multiple voices within a system. Since the voice of the context is multiple, and our approach also must be multiple. It's a situation of multiplicity in voices and its hearers. In this newly emerged situation, we are deliberating the importance of interdisciplinary approach to unsystematized theology in Asia. The implication of this to unsystematic theology is that there should be collaboration in various disciplines for the responsible listening, discerning, and responding to the voices in a context. As we practice interdisciplinary approach, we come to know that we have no definite system to follow. When different voices or perspectives interact, we would decontextualize, recontextualize, and rewrite our theological response to the multiple voices of the context. It is the conviction of Josfin that the notion of interdisciplinarity helps to have meaningful interaction within different disciplines and plays an important intellectual role in the fragmented culture like Asians. It also helps to maximize the outcome and improve upon its implications and practical applications. To emphatically say, interdisciplinarity is a new way of practicing unsystematic theology. It's also the core of this theological consultation that we must be responsible to carry out unsystematization of contextual theologies with this approach. As we do this, being responsible and courageous in unsystematizing contextual theologies. To integrate various disciplines to unsystematize, we must be responsible and courageous. Systematic force will always allure us to settle our theologizing process. However, we must be responsible persons for every emerging voices of our conduct. We are responsible not only for right belief, but for right action, praxis. Here, right action is listening, discerning, and responding to every voices of the conduct. This is a challenging task. This proposal of unsystematization of contextual theologies in Asia will disturb the comfort zone of systematic theologizing in Asian context. Asian context is always in unrest, as I have all elsewhere pointed out. The theological task is never settled for any context and for any time and place, but rather it must go on by unsystematizing our system or systematics. Along with taking responsibility of every voices in a context, you must have a character or a courage to interact meaningfully with the various loci of the people. The following section is proposal or a plan for doing right praxis. Point is to listen and discern multiple voices in Asia. That we have said that contemporary context theologizing is in a systematic process to listen mainly dominant voice of a context, which is a complicated task in an unsystematized context like Asia. Let me share some pointers to decontextualize or recontextualize our current theologizing. How to listen the multiple voices? The willingness of a theologian to listen multiple voices in spite of its nature, content, significance, or relevance is important. He must or she must have a heart to listen voices without its discrimination. The voice would be the voices of feeble, oppressed, marginalized, and sometimes quite opposite to this, adamant, resistant, and other voices. We must be listened to that. Theology will be disturbed as she hears the multiple voices within the same context. However, without discriminating the voices at first, theologian must have a heart to embrace both sinners and saints, oppressed and oppressors, with a pastoral heart. As we do this, theologian listens empathetically. Mind to discern the voices. The second step is more crucial and critical. In this step, the responsibility of theologian is to have a critical mind to discern the voices. Here, theologian distinguishes the nature, content, and character of multiple voices of the context diligently and critically. She must always, as a prophet and prophetess, by reflecting upon the deeper yearnings of the people. Here, theologian critically reflect upon the multiple voices of the context. Vienna also sees theology as a process of thinking and acting Christianly in context. This reflection makes theologies and theologians more humble and open for corrections and revisions. Perhaps we can recall it as the critical Asian principle proposed by Emerito Naspil. The attitude or method here is critical but responsible by recognizing the limitations of every system. Here, theology is working as a prophet. Hands to respond the voices. Our listening and discerning activity must lead us into right action, empowering people in their fuller life participation. The final step in dealing with multiple voices in context is to courageously respond, not only hearing or listening, but also discerning it. Then we have to respond it. Here, theology minister as a priest, becoming a mediator between discordant voices of a context. She reacts to the situation more responsibly. Here, theologian is active in responding to the voices of the context accordingly, such as healing the wound created by taming voice of the context. She must become the voice to the voiceless, empowering people at the margins, wrestling with the so-called hypocritical spiritualities or the voice of the context. This final step is the need of the hour, where all of us respond to the voices boldly and responsibly. Practicing theology in an unconventional or divergent way is the characteristic of this unsystematic theology. Though we are not able to respond to all the aspects of even a local problem, we can ask help and collaboration from other fields where the need of the interdisciplinarity. These three processes must continue, which is the exercise of unsystematizing our theologies. When we do this responsibly, we will always unsystematize, reform, and rejuvenate our theological orientation and further empower to listen many voices in Asia more boldly and responsibly. Let me conclude. Multiple voices from Asian context echo in less methodical and sometimes rational way, but we are called to responsibly listen and discern and courageously respond with the help of interdisciplinary approach. Since our theological process tends to systematize according to the dominant voice of the contextual system, we must be willing to frequently decontextualize and recontextualize our theological activity by keeping the nature of theology, that is liquidity. The growing information contextual realities increasing day by day is a clarion call to notice the tyranny of system that intruded in our theological articulations and urges us to move from contextual theorizing activity to practical activity where we experience unsystematized reality and unsystematic theology spontaneously. The servants of God who are trained in these seminaries must get an opportunity to live out their faith, the living realities of the people before and after their theological training. Before they, when they meet with or live with the people groups, they develop a theology, they come to seminary, and they prepare themselves, and he reorients or she reorients according to that. After he produces, he will be more responsible in listening multiple voices. They are to be tuned to recognize the awareness of the people, and then they spontaneously cherish an unsystematic theology. Humbly, I am aware that suggestion of this paper is not to be understood as another gigantic system, but a call to show forth our courage in unsystematizing current contextual systematic theologies. Let me conclude with a question for further reflection. To the context of unsystematic reality, what should be our contextual theology? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation and for your paper. My question is, if you want to write a textbook for your students entitled Introduction to Unsystematic Theology, what would be the maybe 4 main headings of that book? Or maybe 2 headings?
I think you will put the footnote first.
I find interestingly one writing where at the end of the writing it is mentioned, from the third point of view, footnoting is not a necessary thing. It may not give, why we put footnotes is for giving an authenticity to the writers. But he simply writes in only one footnote, or the end note, he says that this paper doesn't include footnotes. This is the third way of doing theology, where we focus on footnotes or systematize. Oh, sorry.
Sir, can you please explain Brahmanical and Dalit for the others outsiders?
Sure. Brahmanic and Dalit. It's in Indian context, we have caste system, where we have 4 castes. The topper one is Brahmanical, Brahmins. They claim that they are from the head of the god, and they have the right to interpret the scripture. They are priestly caste. And we have Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra as the other, the below caste. Where Dalits, some people include them as the 4th caste or the last caste or outside of this caste system. But Dalits who say, from my research, I have a book with me that I produced. They say, we are not belong to this caste system, so don't call us lower caste or downtrodden caste or something. We are totally different from them. We have our own identity, our own way of thinking. That is called the Dalit way of thinking, Dalit theology. They have their own system, which always in resistance with the dominant Brahmanical system. There is people groups where for so many decades and centuries tamed by the Brahmanical dominant community. They are not able to hear the Vedas. They are not supposed to read the Vedas, hear the Vedas. If you do so, a lot of bad consequences may have.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I like the plurality of voices, and your emphasis on liquidity. In sociology, there's also a sociologist called Sigmund Bauman, who has talked about the postmodern context as liquid. And I think it is only now that we're beginning to be aware of this liquidity. And I like that.
Yeah, that's a good observation and expected question. When we do unsystematic theology, it's a systematic attempt to unsystematize. Here, the process that I suggested, as I said, not to be understood as on another system, but always keep a flexibility in decontextualizing and recontextualize, again a cyclical, maybe if you say, or the other way, the liquidity of theology, we have to keep it always. That is, whether it's systematic or contextual or unsystematic. I even critic of this now for time being, but I would suggest for a post-contextual theology, in which whether it's a contextual or a systematic, we must go ahead again to theology. When we say theology in a neutral sense, theologizing, as I already said, my definition that I pursue, is a human attempt to understand the relationship between God, human, and the cosmos, as Raymond Panikkar shared, the cosmotheantric experience, but I cannot agree all that he shared, but his definition is very catchy. It's a human attempt, it's a fragile attempt. There is always a chance of error. Theology, error, but may not be the word of God. I'm not against the word of God. Theology is a human, fragile attempt. So, whether it's a systematic or contextual, it is fragile attempt.
Thank you for your. Okay, so it is time, I think. Thank you very much, sir, for the beautiful paper. Let us just